November 21st, 2008, Cam was arrested on 3 felony charges tied to a stolen laptop.
What if I told you a stolen computer didn't have to derail a dynasty?
It's 301. What do you want, Benedict?
Here's the keeper left side, Newton.
Oh!
Hello!
Time, space, and reality. It's more than a linear path. It's a prism of infinite possibility, where a single choice can branch out into infinite realities. I am Porkins, and we here at PFN are your guide through the vast new realities. Like, subscribe, and ponder the question, what if? In the year 2010, Cam Newton burst onto the national scene. He set SEC and national records and led Auburn to a perfect season, a national title, and won a Heisman Trophy. From there, he would take the NFL by storm, winning an NFL MVP and an NFC championship. But before he was setting records and winning titles, he was a 5-star recruit from Atlanta, Georgia, who had committed to the University of Florida. In 2007, as a true freshman for the Gators, he backed up another Heisman Trophy winner, playing in 5 games. And in 2008, he would suffer an ankle injury and sit out the rest of the season, taking a medical redshirt. The injury would be the least of his issues, though, as on November 21st, 2008, Newton was arrested on felony charges on an accusation that he stole a laptop computer from another student. Charges would eventually be dropped, but this incident, plus an alleged academic dishonesty scandal, would have Newton reportedly facing suspension,
or worse, expelled.
Newton would promptly transfer from Florida and enroll at Blinn College, win a national junior college title, and then move on to Auburn University. But what if Cam Newton decided to stick it out at Florida? He wouldn't be the only troublemaker hanging out in the Florida locker room. Maybe he simply received a year-long suspension, sitting out the 2009 season, Tim Tebow's final, before being named the starting quarterback for the 2010 season. Now, before we can jump into what could have happened, we need to discuss what did happen. The story of the 2010 Florida Gators is incredibly interesting, and it was a perfect storm of dysfunction and drama that created the absolute mess the nation got to witness. As I'm sure many of you remember, the SEC's dominance of college football wasn't always centered in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. In fact, the SEC became the SEC we need today in 2006, and Florida snuck their way into the BCS championship game against Ohio State. Florida wasn't even supposed to be in that game, as they were ranked 4th going into the SEC championship game against number 9 Arkansas. But with number 3 Michigan sitting idle and number 2 USC losing to unranked UCLA, Florida was able to sneak their way in. As a 7-point dog, the national perception was Florida didn't deserve to be in the game, and Ohio State and Heisman Trophy winner Troy Smith would demolish the Gators. Now, Urban Meyer, Florida's second-year head coach, was no stranger to being the underdog, as just 2 years prior, he had taken Utah, a Mountain West team, who hadn't won an outright conference title since 1957, to a BCS bid and a perfect season. And when the final whistle of the 2006 BCS title game was blown, the SEC was reborn in the fires of a 42-14 shellacking against the pride of the Big Ten, the Ohio State. History would tell us that an SEC team would win the next 6 straight national titles and 11 of the next 15, continuing their dominance to this very day. From there, Urban Meyer and Florida would field a Heisman Trophy winner in 2007, and in 2008 they would return to the national title game against Oklahoma, who they would easily defeat, 24-14. And then came 2009. The 2009 Florida Gators may be the best Florida team ever fielded in Gainesville, but it's also when the cracks of looming danger began to show. With all-time great quarterback Tim Tebow at the helm, Florida ran through their schedule unscathed, essentially going wire-to-wire as the number 1 team in the country. But then, on December 5th, 2009, that Florida squad would witness the birth of maybe the greatest dynasty in college football history, led by a man named Nick Saban. Saban had already won a national title at LSU in 2003, but this was something different. Saban and his Crimson Tide would win 6 national titles in the next 12 years, and there is no sign they won't continue their dominance for years to come. The 2009 SEC championship game was a handing off of the baton. Alabama had just become the SEC's premier program, and Florida was going to have to take a back seat. Unfortunately for the Gators, they took the demotion very poorly. Tim Tebow would cry on national television, and Urban Meyer would be admitted into the hospital with severe chest pains. On December 26th, he would announce his resignation. The following day, he would change his mind, taking a leave of absence instead. And finally, on March 17th, Meyer returned to the Gators, and all was well in Gainesville. Except it wasn't. The Gators would struggle mightily in 2010, finishing the regular season 7-5, and Meyer would retire soon thereafter, declaring the Florida program was broken. 2 years later, as Meyer was installed as Ohio State's head coach, a huge expose titled "From Champs to Chomped: How Urban Meyer Broke Florida Football" was released. The article detailed numerous arrests, rampant drug use, players fighting coaches, and so forth. All in all, it appeared that Florida was broken due to Meyer's lax discipline and a toxic culture. So with all that said, it's hard to see how Cam Newton's alleged issues would have been a deterrent to him sticking around. And so the question becomes, can a single elite quarterback, even one as talented as Cam Newton, change the fortunes of the mess that was the 2010 Florida Gators? Now, message boards, YouTube videos, and Reddit posts all agree Cam Newton would have won a national title. Hands down, no questions asked. What, you question this logic? Well, Newton took a terrible Auburn team to the promised land, so a much more talented Florida team is a no-brainer. You see, Auburn was an average team. And just look at Florida's recruiting rankings, and you will see an elite team. If you can't tell, I'm a little skeptical. I fully believe Cam Newton and Urban Meyer could have won a national title in 2010. But to say it's a foregone conclusion, that's not how college football works. That's not to mention the crazy disservice we attribute to the 2010 Auburn Tigers. Somehow, over the years, we've turned that team into the Northwestern State School for the Blind, who just happened to have Cam Newton, who carried them to every victory both ways, uphill, in the snow. That team had Lee Zimba and Nick Fairley, who were all Americans, and 15 players from that team played it down in the NFL. Sure, it's not an all-time roster, it's not the 2001 Miami Hurricanes, but it was a solid team. Now, without Cam, they would have likely turned to sophomore quarterback Barrett Trotter, and that's clearly a step down, no two ways about it, but I still don't think it's a 4-win team like some would have you to believe. What would have happened if Newton had stayed at Florida? We will never know, you say. Well, welcome to PFN, where we answer the tough questions and get to the bottom of it, no matter what. To me, there is only way forward, and that's to re-sim the 2010 season using whatifsports.com and see what happens. Before we jump in, let's discuss our methodology. First, we moved Cam Newton from Auburn to Florida and promoted Barrett Trotter to QB1 for Auburn. We used the 2011 version of Trotter to simulate what the 2010 version may have looked like. Next, we resimmed all of Florida and Auburn's regular season games, with the exception of their FCS opponents. Those results are just going to have to stand as is. Following the regular season, the resulting SEC championship game was played, and then the resulting BCS title game was simmed to determine the ultimate winner of this scenario. Now, it's worth noting that yes, this is only one possible result, as every game was only simmed one time, with that result standing regardless of personal feelings. That's what college football is all about. One game for all the marbles, no mulligans, no do-overs. Eternal glory requires the greatest of risks, and we here at PFN wouldn't have it any other way. So without further ado, let's do it. Florida would start the season hot, winning their first 4 games, defeating Miami of Ohio, USF, Tennessee, and Kentucky. Now, Kentucky did take them into double overtime on the back of Randall Cobb and Mike Hartline, but the national consensus was that Florida was looking ahead to their Week 5 matchup with Alabama. Up north at Auburn, things were not going as well. After starting the season with an easy win over Arkansas State, Mississippi State knocked off the Tigers 21-20 on a last-second touchdown pass by Chris Relf. The Tigers would get things turned around, though, as they would knock off Clemson and 12th-ranked South Carolina to get out to a 3-1 record to start the season. Back to Florida. Their first real test would occur in Week 5 as they would travel to Tuscaloosa as the 9th-ranked Gators take on the top-ranked Crimson Tide. Alabama would take a 13-6 lead into halftime. And boy, they would come out firing in the second half as Mark Ingram and Trent Richardson would pound away at the Gators' defense as they would pull away for a 34-16 victory. The theme of the Gators season so far seems to be a failure to finish, and that continued in this matchup as they would only score 1 touchdown while settling for 4 field goal attempts, making 3 of them. One loss isn't a death knell, though, as they need to figure it out soon if they want to get back into the national title race. And they would do just that, rattling off 3 straight wins, beating 11th-ranked LSU, Mississippi State, and whipping rival Georgia to the tune of 41-0, as Newton would throw for 317 yards and 4 touchdowns. 8 games in, the Gators are 7-1 and are clearly the class of the SEC East, as they have a 1-game lead on South Carolina with only 2 conference games left, one against the aforementioned Gamecocks. Now, while Florida was reasserting itself, Auburn was looking to do the same, as they would take down Louisiana Monroe and Kentucky, setting up a must-win matchup with 9th-ranked Arkansas. Auburn, and particularly Barrett Trotter, struggled against the Razorbacks. Trotter would complete only 45% of his passes as the Razorbacks would win 34-24. With 8th-ranked LSU coming to town the following week, it would have been easy for Auburn to pack it in, but instead they rallied and took down the Tigers 33-10. If you think Auburn has some kind of Jekyll and Hyde routine going on, you would be right, as they would find themselves trailing 3-4 Ole Miss, who had already lost to Jacksonville State and Vanderbilt late in the 4th quarter. Now, they would hold off the upset, though, as Trotter would find Darvin Adams in the end zone with 16 seconds left to secure the win. With only 4 weeks left, Auburn is trailing Alabama and Arkansas in the SEC West, and has some work to do if they want to get to the SEC championship game. To finish the season, they would flatten UT Chattanooga and easily dispatch of Georgia. And the only thing standing in their way to a 10-2 season is the Alabama Crimson Tide. With 4 teams still in play to win the SEC West, Auburn went to work in the Iron Bowl. And unfortunately, the Tigers didn't have an answer from Mark Ingram, who rushed for 146 yards, and Alabama would cruise to a 48-17 victory. This, combined with Arkansas downing LSU, the SEC West champion would be the Razorbacks. Ranked in the top 5 with an 11-1 record, Bobby Petrino would get a shot at winning an SEC title. The SEC East was much easier to determine, as Florida easily dispatched of Vanderbilt, and with a South Carolina loss to Arkansas, Florida would clinch the SEC East in Week 10. They would take care of business against South Carolina and then Appalachian State, and would claim a number 2 ranking in the AP poll, with only the 22nd-ranked Florida State Seminoles standing in their way from an 11-1 season. We all know rivalry games can produce mind-bending results, and this was just that. At the end of regulation, Newton would only have 16 yards rushing and 198 passing, as the game would head to overtime with the score all tied up at 17. On the second play of overtime, Cam Newton would drop back, and feeling the pressure up the middle, he would throw up an ill-advised pass to the pylon, which would be picked off. Christian Ponder would find Willie Halstead to end the game in a 23-17 upset victory for the Seminoles, and end the Gators' national title hopes. The season's not over, though, as they would face off against the Arkansas Razorbacks 1 week later in the SEC championship game, with a BCS bowl game in the balance. Instead of a lackluster matchup of 12-0 Auburn facing off against a 3-loss Gamecock squad in the SEC championship game, we got number 2 Arkansas versus number 9 Florida, with all kinds of national implications riding on this game. And what was billed as an instant classic ended up as an entirely one-sided affair, as Arkansas would jump out to a 28-3 lead in the 3rd quarter and would cruise to a 28-10 final score behind Ryan Mallett's 362 yards and 3 touchdowns. The Arkansas Razorbacks would finish the season 12-1 SEC champions, and Florida would fall to 10-3. Ask any Florida fan, and they would certainly trade the 7-5 season for a 10-3 record and an SEC championship game appearance in a vacuum. While Auburn fans, on the other hand, would surely be smarting about the changes. They went from 13-0 SEC champs heading to the BCS title game to 9-3 and heading to the Capital One Bowl. Clearly a big disappointment. But we also need to take an in-universe perspective, though, and you would likely see a very different reaction. Florida fans were expecting a national title in 2010 with John Brantley at the helm. Imagine what their expectations would have been with Cam Newton strolling the sidelines. So we can infer that they would be pretty devastated with a 10-3 finish. While Auburn fans would likely be cautiously optimistic going forward, they improved on last year's record, beat multiple top 15 teams, and Barrett Trotter, while inconsistent, did show some flashes of brilliance. Now our simulation's not over. We have to find a new national champ. BCS needs to pick 2 teams, and the Oregon Ducks are the obvious number 1 team. They're sitting at 11-0 and have been ranked number 1 in the AP poll for 8 consecutive weeks. Their opponent, on the other hand, is one of 2 contenders. TCU from the Mountain West at 12-0 and Arkansas at 12-1. TCU's whole resume hinges on their 40-point beatdown of 10-2 Utah. Arkansas, on the other hand, has a top 10 strength of schedule compared to TCU's 81st ranked strength of schedule, and their one loss was to 10-2 Alabama by 4 points, who all the advanced stats agree was the second best team in 2010, trailing only Cam Newton-led Auburn. I expect the voters who make up a solid portion of the BCS ranking would unanimously choose Arkansas over TCU. And while TCU fans certainly feel slighted, it's hard to argue against the Razorbacks. Before we reveal the results of the BCS championship game, there is one loose end to tie up: the Heisman Trophy. In 2010 for the Auburn Tigers, Cam Newton rushed for 1,473 yards, threw for 2,854 yards, and had 51 total touchdowns. In this universe where Newton remains at Florida, his numbers would have regressed to 2,438 yards and 14 touchdowns through the air, and 1,204 yards and 13 touchdowns on the ground. He essentially ended up with 416 fewer passing yards, 269 fewer rushing yards, and 24 fewer touchdowns. He still would have set the SEC record for rushing yards by a quarterback, though it would quickly be overcome by Johnny Manziel's 1,410 rushing yards in 2012, and then again by Lynn Bowden's 1,468 yards in 2019. And he would still become the first SEC player to throw for 2,000 and rush for 1,000 in the same season. But unfortunately, the 24 fewer touchdowns and fading down the stretch would have cost him a Heisman Trophy. The final Heisman tally would reveal that Stanford's Andrew Luck was the winner, with his 3,338 yards and 32 touchdowns. Newton would finish a distant fourth behind Luck, LaMichael James, and Kellen Moore. Now, it's finally time to complete the last piece of this puzzle. Number 1 Oregon versus number 2 Arkansas in the BCS championship game. Let's jump right in. It was a game of quarters. Arkansas would own the first, jumping out to a quick 10-0 lead. But Oregon would score 22 unanswered in the second to go up 22-10 at halftime. Arkansas would come out hot in the third. We would have a ball game on our hands. Let's pick up the action early in the fourth quarter. Oregon up 25-24, driving deep in Arkansas territory. Early in the fourth, Kenyon Barter takes the handoff and scoots in for a 7-yard touchdown. Oregon extends their lead to 32-24 with a little over 13 minutes to go in the game. Arkansas would waste little time driving back down the field as Ryan Mallett would find Chris Craig for a 26-yard touchdown. They would not be able to convert the 2-point conversion, though, making the score 32-30 with 9:43 remaining. After an Oregon 3-and-out, Arkansas' Zach Hawker would connect from 31 yards out to put Arkansas back in front, 33-32 with 5:56 left in the fourth. On the ensuing drive, Oregon quarterback Darren Thomas would drop back to pass, but Arkansas would get to him, forcing a fumble which would be recovered by the Razorbacks. A few plays later, Ryan Mallett would find Jarius Wright for a 16-yard touchdown, extending the Arkansas lead to 8. 40-32 with only 2:16 left on the clock. Oregon would struggle to move under the pressure, and on 4th and 2 with less than 30 seconds, Darren Thomas would keep it on the read option, and he would bounce to the outside and race down the sideline, making Oregon just a 2-point conversion away from sending the national title game to overtime. Now, Oregon would get tricky with the game on the line, trying a play-action screen pass, but Arkansas would sniff it out, stuffing them for a loss, and Coach Bobby Petrino and the Razorbacks have found the promised land for the first time since 1964. Woo pig suey. And there you have it. The Razorbacks would be the ultimate beneficiaries of this Auburn-Florida swap. But before we go, let's discuss some of the long-term ramifications that could have come from this change. Firstly, Urban Meyer doesn't leave the team for health reasons after an abysmal 2010 season. But that doesn't last long. Cam would go pro after 2010, and Florida would go 7-6 in 2011. Urban Meyer would jump ship and take the Ohio State opening just in time to watch the Gators implode due to toxic culture that he had brought to Gainesville. As for Auburn, nothing really changes. After 2010, Barrett Trotter does not improve, and 2 years later, Gene Chizik is fired for poor performance after a 3-9 campaign in 2012. Then there's Arkansas. The Razorbacks would finish 11-2 in 2011, finishing 5th in the AP poll, and Arkansas fans would be demanding a statue of Bobby Petrino be commissioned immediately. Unfortunately, in virtually every universe, Bobby has some serious personality flaws, and a motorcycle accident with a co-ed would make his life difficult. But Petrino would escape the axe, though. As we all know, winning makes college boosters and ADs make moral decisions, and Petrino now has a national title in his back pocket. Arkansas stays an above-average SEC West program until a 3-star quarterback named Lamar Jackson in 2015 picks the Razorbacks, wins a Heisman Trophy, putting up ungodly numbers on the best defenses in the country. Another national title would elude the Razorbacks, though, and Razorback fans all seem to be in agreement that one title is more than enough for the time being. And that's going to be it for today, folks. We've followed Cam Newton's ripples as far as we can for now, so please tell me in the comments what we got right and what we got wrong. I always look forward to any questions, comments, or snide remarks. Don't forget, you can follow me on Twitter at pfnporkins or email me at porkins.pfn@gmail.com. Otherwise, stay safe and always remember that men's bonnets are the fashion of the future, so get yours now before it's too late. Just tweet code PFN to Cam Newton directly, and he won't send you one free of charge.
As Frank Broyles anxiously watches the clock, he looks, he waits. It's over. There are yells and hugs and repeated shots that claim, "We're number one. We're number one." This claim later to be recognized when the Football Writers of America vote the Razorbacks winners of the Grantland Rice Trophy.